functioning addict. This is very common where people are still moving forward in life. You think on the surface, everything's fine, but behind the scenes, they're tearing their body down, tearing their mindset down. They're losing their respect for themselves, and they're all alone behind the scenes.
In 2014, my life really started to get out of control, and I knew I had a big time problem. I got in touch with a counselor to help with my recovery. So I had one relapse in April of 2015. But since then, I've been clean and sober, and I've been able to switch that addiction and that drive into something a lot more positive. But I do want to preface it, and to people out there, once an addict, you're always an addict. And even if you have a good addiction, those good addictions can be bad.
What's going on, guys? We got another episode today. I'm excited for this one, actually. Everybody loves a comeback. And you've heard me say this before, that addicts make the best entrepreneurs. When you think about it, sometimes we have addictions that we put our time and focus on that are not so great, which we could talk about a little bit here real quick. But sometimes we put it into business, and wherever we put it, it's going to expand. And we got a great comeback story here today. We got Kyle Mark on the call. He was once struggling with addiction like many people have throughout their life, and he beat that addiction. It led him down the road to coming into a new path in life. He started going into real estate and went into the firefighting space at the same time. So he's a firefighter and a real estate professional. And then life kicked in again. He had some pretty unfortunate things happen to him as a firefighter where it caused some injuries, which we'll talk about, but it led him to take his focus and put it into real estate. He decided to come join the Wolfpack here just recently, and we're excited he did. He's a great guy. He's got a great story, and he's crushing it right now. And I'm excited to get him on here so he can tell a story to you guys. But Kyle, let's get in here and kind of start from maybe your background, your past. And I know it's kind of a vulnerable spot, and I'm grateful that you're willing to share this because I think it's going to help a lot of people. And I've seen this happen a lot in life where people struggled early on in their 20s and kind of got lost. Very common when they went off to college and girls and parties and things like that. And then they rediscovered themselves later in life and decided to make a radical change, which you did. So maybe kind of give a background on kind of how all that happened and kind of the struggles you were dealing with and what it did to change your life when you made that radical change to kind of pivot from your addictions.
Yeah, I think, well, first, thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to just jump on and talk with you just about life and business and all that. And so for me, I'm located up in Canada, in Vancouver, which is one of the most expensive cities in the entire world, which makes the real estate game, that more exciting and competitive. But yeah, going just a little bit about me, I think even from my younger years, I never really had, and that's why, with goal setting and things of that nature is so important. I never really had a lot of direction. I played a lot of sports in high school, athletics, basketball, things of that nature. That was my identity. School wasn't, important to me. So, didn't really have like a great group of choice of friends growing up, which, led me down to a path. And that's why even in my past, in my recovery, I've gone to speak at my high school and things of that nature to implement that, the choices and the decisions you make when you're 12, 13, 14 years old can be very detrimental. And, when you're 25, 28. So, I never had goals. I didn't want to go to university. I hated school. So I just ended up finding like a trade. So that's what I did out of high school. And I'm like, if I make, $70,000, $80,000 a year, that would be great. And so I didn't really have a lot of goals. I didn't have any education background, things of that nature. So I got into the trades, was working with all that sort of stuff. And that's when, continued in with, partying, not implementing myself with the proper friends. But one thing that was imparted on me was always a work ethic. So even though, I was working in construction, things of that nature, I always showed up to work, never missed a day. Even through, my substance abuse and alcoholism, I still never missed a day. I was a completely functioning addict, right? And, I come from like a family of immigrants. All my grandparents came over from Europe. They got into construction because, they didn't have an education background. So I was always involved with being on like a construction site. My parents always built homes and sold homes, and that's how they kind of made it. My dad was just a teacher. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and they were able to pay off their mortgage through real estate and building. So that was always kind of in my background. So even when I was, doing my thing, real estate was always kind of top of mind. I started getting into pre-sales here in Vancouver in 2013. And that really helped me kind of be where I am today. And, my crazy, I had right out of my senior year and first couple of years of high school or out of high school, things were getting a little bit out of hand with, the trouble I was getting into, things of that nature. kind of took a step back. And then when I moved into the city, I was living in the burbs, kind of got mixed up with it again, with the people that I was hanging out in. And in 2014, that's when, my life really started to get out of control. And I knew I had a big time problem. I was always really good at dividing my secret party life from, my family and my good friends, right? But it came to a point where that I was not in control anymore. It was affecting stuff within my family, within my job. And so with me and with most addicts, you're kind of black and white. And it was like, okay, this is my last year on New Year's. I'm like, I'm going to do it big. And then I'm getting help. And that's what I did. I went out, did it really big on New Year's in 2014. And then the next day, I got in touch with the counselor to help with my recovery. So I had one relapse in April of 2015. But since then, I've been clean and sober, and I've been able to switch that addiction and that drive into something a lot more positive. But I do want to preface it, and to people out there, once an addict, you're always an addict. And even if you have a good addiction, those good addictions can be bad. And I know you've talked about that as well.
Yeah, but definitely, for sure. And very grateful that you're sharing this, because I think it's a lot more common than people probably think it is. They all see friends and family dealing with this, even themselves, but they just don't talk about it. It's kind of hidden in the closet. And it's just like you said, the term a functioning addict. This is very common, where people are still moving forward in life. You think on the surface everything's fine, but behind the scenes they're tearing their body down, tearing their mindset down. They're losing their respect for themselves, and they're all alone behind the scenes. Let's kind of go back just a little bit. So you mentioned work ethic, which is truly one of the most important character traits that you need to be successful in business or anything in life, from relationships to health. How much did your sports background lead to some of those lifelong, traits that you have, as far as like work ethic, understanding that you can improve yourself and get better than you currently are, meaning run faster, throw farther? Kind of give me a take on that, and then let's kind of move up through where you just got to, and then go into how you decided to get into real estate, and also start out going into becoming a firefighter. But I think a lot of people that were in sports, I've seen, once their sports career ended, fell into addiction. You see this with professional athletes. You see this with a lot of high school athletes. And I think, just from my experience and seeing this with a lot of people, it's so time consuming, and it consumes so much of their focus. As soon as that disappears, they have an idle mind, and they don't know where to fill all that time, and they just gravitate towards something like that. So did that kind of happen for you, or kind of give your take on all that in your life?
Yeah, I think, in terms of work ethic, is definitely sport. And I think definitely my background being from, an immigrant type family, I'm second generation Canadian, and having a family where everything was taken away from you. All my great grandfathers were murdered, during the Russian Revolution. My family got taken, everything was taken from them, and they had to start from scratch. They never complained. They never asked for a handout. We were taught, you put your nose down and you work. And I think that was really, that built that foundational piece from my grandparents and then my parents, of just working hard. And then with sports, what's great is you need to learn how to lose before you know how to win, right? That I think, I think so many people, even too, if you're always winning, and that can be great, but if you don't know how to get through adversity, I think adversity is something you need to head on, get into quickly. And that's what sports does, right? Whether you get cut from teams, or you're coming off the bench and you want to be a starter, losing tough games, going to the gym, training, hard practices, conditioning, going through that, it just makes the winning so much, it tastes so much better, but it also starts implementing such important life skills of what it takes to be a winner, what you got to do. How do you, as a person, when you lose, or you get, physically injured or emotionally injured, how do you come back from that? Are you just going to walk away? Or are you going to continue to get through that grit, get through those injuries to perform? And I think that definitely helped me. And I, I have a 2-year-old son. We've already got him when he was 18 months playing soccer. We're going to get him into jiu-jitsu, things of that nature, because, if he wants to become a professional athlete, amazing. But I want to do it is because I want him to have those life lessons. You need to learn to get your face pushed into the mud, and that a real testament of who you are as a person is how you get out of that mud. Are you going to stay down there and you're going to retract, or are you going to continue to push forward?
100%. Very well said. And it's also like you pretty much nailed everything about it, but like there's also the understanding in sports creates, what are we always doing? fighting competition. And then I think when people get into business and they're thinking they're just going to run straight to the end zone with no problems and no fights and nobody in their way, it kind of crushes them when they get it coming from like a 9-to-5 job, and they get in this world where people want their market share, people want their deals, people want their income, and they're in the competitive world now. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs came from the sports background. They're a lot more conditioned to handle that type of intensity in the marketplace. But the way I want to go with this is now, so you overcame this. I guess the question I have for you is, now that you have kind of turned the corner on this, and you never turn the corner completely, so you're going to fight that forever, but where you're at right now, you're winning it in this current moment. Do you see all that you went through as a blessing now, or was it still kind of a curse and you have some resentment over it? Or now in hindsight, looking back, you realize it was a blessing in disguise?
Yeah, I mean, I know for myself, and probably very similar to other people who struggle with addiction, there's a lot of shame that comes with it, right? And I think for several years, man, there was a lot of shame with it, and I didn't really know who I was. And I'm still, fighting those, inner demons of figuring out what life is, because you're still always looking for that next rush. And, you can never be, it's like this thing of satisfaction that can never be quenched, right? You're always looking for the next thing. You're always looking for the next thing. And I think now I look at, there's so many people, whether, mental health or substance abuse, things of that nature, that are struggling. And we all go through things for a reason. God has put us on this earth. He has, knows our story, and he wants us to, and that's what I firmly believe, to express our own struggles, because you never know, if you don't bring light into the darkness is always going to be there. And you don't know who your story can inspire or get out. And I think that, if you, instead of, for me, there's a lot of shame, wear it as a badge of honor that you have gone through that, and you're there to help and support other people along the way. Because for sure, within your network, there's people that people that they know. And I've now used that, shame in terms of a tool to help be able to talk to people who are struggling with those things, or if family members are dealing with that, like giving them some advice to try to help them get out of those holes. So yeah, it's also shaped me too, is, we're in a delicate balance, and we're just a couple decisions away where you can fully fall off that train and, lose a lot, lose your marriage, lose your relationship with your kids, your friends, your parents, your business. And life is not, it is a pretty fine line. You're just a decision away that can lead to a snowball effect too. So life is fragile, and not to take anything for granted as well.
100%. I guess the last thing on this one, and we'll move on, but do you remember the exact kind of moment you decided in your mind that you were going to make that radical stop at that moment? You said you did New Year's, you blew it out, and then you stopped. But I know a lot of times addicts, they go back and forth. They want to stop, but they don't. Then they're going back and forth. And then something finally is so overwhelming that it triggers just a radical stop like that. Do you remember what it was for you that really pushed you past that point where it's just like enough is enough? Or was it a combination of things, or one specific experience? Or how did you decide to pull the trigger like that?
Yeah, I think it was like that later year, 2014, where, I was using a lot. I was drinking like every single day. And then I remember I was at work, and it was like after like a Christmas party, and my boss was like, he's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "You got to shape up." I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm here at work." He's like, "Your nose is bleeding." And that was like something that really is imprinted in my mind. And then there were some family events where I was starting to go to, and I was strung out, and I was not engaging properly. And then I think there was around that Christmas time, I'm like, if I don't change this in the new year, and I'm always about like whole numbers, like if I start something, it has to be on a Monday, I need a clean slate. I'm like, it has to be this year, it has to be now. And if I don't make that choice, my life is going to be flushed down the toilet, like 100%. I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my family, because it was getting so ramped up that it wasn't going to go well. And that's where it was for me, that it was just like a clean break, New Year's, get some help, let's go and move forward.
Yeah. So one of the things I respect you for is you're strong on the personal development side, that's the first step, is to develop yourself, is to break that bad habit. Now you're very well spoken, and also you stay physically fit. So let's talk about kind of like the transformation side, because a lot of people are stuck in that darkness and they want a radical change for their future, but they don't understand that you have to make a completely radical change at that moment. Change of friends, change the patterns of life, change what you're putting in your body. Everything changes, and it's a big change. Did you stumble into personal education? Like you went down like Think and Grow Rich, Rich Dad Poor, like you started reading books, or what made you kind of move down this? And then maybe starting once you made that decision to stop, the first month or two as you began to detox, how did this change your mindset? How did this change your vision of who you were now? And did you start to gain more stronger self-image and more respect for yourself that led you to
Mhm.
believe now that you've distanced yourself from that old you, that you can become a new you? And where was
Mhm.
kind of like the genesis for this path that led you into real estate, I guess?
Yeah, I think for me, like for myself, I'm a Christian, right? So I always think in the back of my mind, it was God within me telling me like you are worth so much more. I have so much more for you, but you need to want it and you need to follow like my promptings. And he's like, you're not a robot. You can do whatever you want. And my family, I know that they've been praying for me for years and years and years. And I think that helped push me to help get that self-awareness and being, I guess, that sense and that prompting from God to be like, this is like your chance. I'm giving you your way out. You're going to be lost if you don't go this way. So I think that's where it started. And then from there, like I've always loved fitness, with my background, and then I started going like all in to fitness, and that was like my new addiction for like a couple years after, which wasn't 100% healthy, but you always got to fill that void. I cut out like 90% of my friends. I had to do it. I didn't go out. And through that experience too, I lost a lot of really good friendships. My addiction and my life choices cost me, and there's a lot of pain with that. And that's stuff that I'm gonna have to deal with for the rest of my life as well. But fitness definitely started to take over. And then also I started to have more of an awareness that being in construction, it's great when you're young, you don't have student debt, you rise the ranks, the hourly is high. But then around that time when you start sobering up, my life trajectory just took off. Right. And it's a correlation with that. And so I'm like, I need to get out of construction. I can't retire. I can't do that. But I'm not going back to university. I don't have a university background. What do I do? So I said, I got to be efficient to what I have. Firefighting, that seems like a perfect fit. It's extremely competitive to get in up here. Because essentially it's only when people retire, it's a really good job, great pension, benefits, all that. So it took me about 4 years to get on with the fire department. So through my sobriety, continue to get fit, working towards getting my resume up, things of that nature. And then in the meantime, I hated what I was doing. I was a pipe fitter. So I was like, if whether I get into firefighting now or in a couple of years, I can't do construction anymore. And that's when I started doing my real estate course. I fast tracked it, did that in like 6 weeks. And then essentially the day I was like writing my licensing exam, I got the call from my department saying that a job offer for the department. But in terms of like reading, I don't read a lot. I know like everyone says you need to read books.
You don't need to. Yeah, you don't need to.
My wife says I don't know how to read because I don't. The only books I read are to like my son. I listen to like podcasts, things of that nature. I've read like a couple books, but that's not like my big thing. YouTube and things of that nature. I should probably read more books, but I definitely don't.
Yeah. I mean, now with social media and podcasting, the speed of acquiring the information, but reading is hard with the distracted mind, short form content these days. But it's not only reading, it's what you're acquiring from the book. And it's just that the past, you didn't have faster forms of communication that we could acquire more. So reading is going to still be important, but it's going to kind of transition its way out as more people can realize that they can listen to more audiobooks, listen to more podcasts, and develop that way as well. It's very common. Like, so my path is kind of very similar in a different way. I fell from grace, and my dad's Presbyterian minister. I don't talk too much publicly about my faith. I let everybody self-discover on their own. It's not my job to kind of push on them, but I do touch on it a little bit. And I grew up in church around high school, girls parties and everything kicked in, and I walked away from my faith, and I convinced myself, because my life's not perfect, I don't have everything I want, God's abandoned me and hates me and all this stuff. And so really I had convinced myself of that. And for a big part of my adult life, until everything hit rock bottom and I basically almost took my own life, that's when I decided to do two things. That's when I brought God back into my life and started praying again. And that's also when personal growth and education came in at the same time. So it's kind of hand in hand. Mm-hmm. And so it is interesting that you shared that. Now, during that window of time, I think this is what they call no man's land, which is where you had a past life and you've got all this life that you're tied up into. And as you try to escape it, people try to keep you from escaping it. And you have to cut the cord and sever the cord from that old life and start a new one, but it leaves you all alone. And
Mhm.
this is a moment of self-discovery. And I believe it's when God develops that relationship with us. So it sounded like you had like a 4-year gap in between when all that happened and before you kind of start out in your new life. Did you develop any new sets of friends along the way, or was this kind of an individual journey until you got up to that point? Because I don't think people think about it, that one of the reasons why a lot of people go back to their old friends and their old environment is that they do make this leap and they jump out strong, and they're going into the world by themselves, and then they get all alone and they get lost, and then the default is to go back to that current environment, those current friends, and then they get sucked back in. So if you're in that spot, guys, just know this is how it is. This is the mindset battle. You have to stay on that new path, and you can't turn around and look back, because you'll get sucked back. But
Mhm.
that being said, did that kind of, how does that, looking back at your story, how did that relate at all? Or
Yeah, no, for sure. There's definitely a no man's land because I mean, for a couple of years, I didn't go out, didn't do anything. I felt uncomfortable being around alcohol. I felt uncomfortable when my friends were like drinking. So it was very isolating. I didn't do AA, which a lot of people do. I was working with an individual counselor to get through that. But it was probably, I would say, yeah, 4 years of no man's land. And it was lonely because, like I said, I had this void that I felt. So I started filling it with fitness. And then I started filling it with like relationships with women that were just going nowhere. So for years, that was like my new addiction, was like the gym and women. And it was even more, almost more so a lonely life. And, but friendships like were continuing to be tested through that time. And I was going through this period where I was still kind of going out of control. I was still out of control. Like it was just, my addiction wasn't fully I don't know, tethered, right? And so I knew I needed like some change in that. And yeah, it wasn't until I like met my wife
yeah,
where things started to really settle for me. But through that, church was still like a constant. I was really wrestling with my faith and trying to figure out like, where do I see myself in this world? As a Christian, this is what I've done. These are the things that I've done. How do I move forward with my life? I was frustrated because, it was taking me a long time to get in with the fire department. But you have no idea. You're being refined on an everyday type of level, and you don't know what the reason is for it. But it was, and I think, yeah, after you beat it, you think it's all, a celebration, but it will lead you to other choices where you're going to put your time. And if you don't do that wisely, you can be in a rut for a couple of years, even though you're like quote unquote clean, right? So yeah, it took me from, when I was like 2015, and when I met my wife in late 2018, that's when things started to really slow down for me,
yeah.
and where I am now. Yeah.
I mean, it's a big problem. The girls and all this type of stuff with the young men, and they're watching movies and watching all these things on social media, and they think the goal is to go out there and run the scoreboard up and sleep with as many girls as they can. But what this leads to is a lot of problems. And I was guilty of this in my young age, and I was very thankful and grateful that I didn't have some really bad issues come from it, because I've had a lot of friends that had accidental children they weren't expecting, STDs that can't go away. But what really stopped me from doing that in my mid-20s was that one day I just realized, if I keep going down this hookup culture, like I can't respect a woman enough that I could ever marry one and have a family with and stay with them. And I think you young guys need to think about that. It's cool to go have fun and do all this, but if you want to get married, you want to have a family, you want to respect your wife, you want to respect your family, you need to start treating with women with respect. And also, same thing on the flip side, women, if they're out there and these young girls are out there going to the bars and hooking up with different guys, different friends, what that does for them long term is it drops the value of their long term, I
Mhm.
guess, looking at business asset to the marketplace. When guys see that on the flip side, then it makes it harder for them to want to commit to them. So it's becoming a bad problem in our culture, especially for the family and for people that want to have a strong one long term. And then when you're with so many people, when problems happen with the current relationship, it's easier just to say, well, there's all these other options. And just instead of trying to figure it out, they just say, let me tuck tail and run and go to the next one. So it's
Yeah.
something that y'all need to think about. But let's go into now your next set of adversaries that you kind of run into. So you started doing firefighting, and then what happened? You came into a pretty big side a big blow coming out of the side from nowhere. You didn't expect it. So what kind of happened with all that? And you were at
Yeah.
work one day, and then you're working a fire and something. I know.
Yeah, it's just funny, right? You look back in your life story and you think you climb the mountain and you're gonna, go down like the valley, but then all of a sudden it's like there's another peak that you're climbing. So for me, I get on with the fire department. It's awesome. And I'm on for, what was that? I got on in 2016. So 2019 has been 3 years. There's the arson, and one of the doors was locked, and they kicked down the door to get in to gain access, and really jumbled up my back, and so it wasn't a big deal. Rehabbed a little bit, and then it was a couple weeks later, and 5-6 weeks later in October, it was the day before I was actually going to propose to my wife. So another fire, and it was like the busiest day. We were up, I think, for the entire night. And we're at another structure fire doing like some overhaul where you're trying to get access to the ceiling to, see if there's fire extension, because all the water, the insulation, the drywall gets very heavy. So you're tearing down some of this stuff, and a bunch of it drops down on like my head and my side, my shoulder, and it like re-aggravates my back. And I'm like, okay, whatever. This happened back in September, not a big deal. And over the course of the next couple of weeks, like I lost full function of my right side. I had full blown sciatica. I had, with my MRIs, full disc herniations that were putting constant pressure on my nerves. And to this day, I'm still suffering with that. And I'm finally getting surgery sometime this fall. But because, I got these injuries and we got into COVID, everything really slowed down. The medical system slowed down and couldn't get the treatment that I needed to rehab. So it, made my injury worse. And I just, found out that I got another MRI done, and they found 4 more small disc bulges on my thoracic spine. So there's 6 that I'm dealing with now. And it was with that adversity, I could, go down and it's, it's been depressing for sure. I've been very fit my whole life. I still try to stay fit, but there's limitations. But my physical body, I've had no control over for the last 4 years. And through that, like I said, I've been had to take time off work, waiting for surgery. But when that initial injury happened in 2019, I didn't think I was going to come back then because of how severe that injury was. And that's when my real estate journey, and I had another switch. I'm like, well, what am I going to do if firefighting doesn't work out? I don't have a fallback, kind of similar to like trade school. I'm like, where am I going to go? I need to start taking this seriously, because I was licensed for 3 years, up at 4 years, to that point, and it wasn't putting any money in it. I did a couple deals with family and some friends, but it wasn't anything that I was ever going to produce. It was something strictly just on the side. But then when I got injured and I didn't know I came back in the beginning of 2020, that's when my journey really started. So I only, considered myself going into my 4th year now, as opposed to being when I got licensed in 2017.
Yeah. It's just so important for you guys listening right now to understand. It's like, a lot of times we hear about, we got firefighters, police, military, and we know that they're out there, but we don't ever like really slow down to humanize it and think about it. And this is why it's so important when you guys see them in your community to thank them for what they're doing, because look at the risks that they take. And I want to go into a couple other things, but I'd be probably upsetting everybody if I didn't ask for like a cool firefighting story. I mean, I think every young guy at some point wants to be a firefighter in some area. Give kind of like the take on, like, you get the call, flying down the pole. I don't know if y'all still have poles, but what is it like to get out there and like, it's your job? Like, give the mindset, because like you're literally coming up into a burning building, and it sounds cool to say it, and then when you're like right there at the moment, and this is what you got to do, like you still have to make that jump to go in. Like, I'm sure some guys stand at the door and can't do it, but you did it. Like, kind of let someone hop in your shoes or in your helmet there for a second and describe that experience, because that's pretty cool. I think it's something that very few people would have the bravery to do.
Yeah, I think with the job, it's, with fires, they're not as often as they used to be, right? So, with the sprinkler system, things of that nature, a lot of them become like defensive fires, where sometimes you don't even go into the building. It's called a surround and drown. You just make sure it doesn't extend to any other buildings along the side. But when the fire bell does come, because there's different tones depending on the emergency. So if it's a battalion tone, you know that it's something major. So battalion tone goes off, it's a different tone, and you're waiting to see what it is. Is it a high velocity, impact crash? Is it a fire? Is it, whatever. So when a fire does come in, people get fired up. because that's what we wanted to do. Probably 9% of the job is medical. So it's so small, the amount of fires in my area that we go to. So you get a huge adrenaline rush going there. You're putting your equipment on depending on what the fire is. I remember my first fire was this big barn fire, and you're driving up and you see the flames are just gushing out, and you can see it from, a couple, kilometers away, and you're getting ready to go in. So I think most people, it's very, everyone's jacked up to ready to go in. I think for most, getting in there, you don't even think about ever something happening to you, like being injured or possibly dying, things of that nature. You're like wanting to go in to help. I know one of the last structure fires I went in before I was injured, usually there's all these protocols for safety, right? You can't go into a fire unless there's another truck with you, because that it's called a rapid intervention team, right? So you need to have a RIT team to support any fallen firefighters in a fire. But if it's in certain circumstances, you can get around that and put firefighters in if it's a life or death scenario. So when the last one, there's someone trapped in in a resident underneath a grocery store, a small grocer. And we had confirmation there's someone in there. The dad's there. He's like, my son's, inside. You need to get him. There wasn't another truck, so we didn't have the support. But the captain made the calls that we need to go in there. So it's like you're going in there. If you go down, there's nobody, no firefighter. We don't have enough. There's the captain who's assessing the scene. The driver is always at the pump, and then there's just me and another guy. So I had a new guy behind me on the hose, and we're going in. But it's like never. We're going in, we're going to get this person. There's nothing in your mind, because if you pause or anything like that, you're not made for it, and you're going to make a mistake. And, we went in, the person was identified, and myself and another person carried him out. Unfortunately, the smoke got to him and he passed, but is quite an exhilarating job. And I think that's why too, within the fire department, there is a lot of addiction issues too, because there's a lot of people that are wanting a job where it feeds that. But then you also have, like PTSD and things of that nature that come with the mental side. But yeah, there's definitely lots of story. I can go on and on, but it was a great place to be.
So like what was like when you went, so you're having some physical issues, they probably tried to prescribe, certain heheavy painkillers. How did you just not taking them, or do you take the
No, didn't take them. I'm on a bunch of nerve blockers still to get me through. There was one time where I had a really bad flare up, and I got a synthetic opioid and my wife and I, had a big discussion about it. And it was such a low dose that, I didn't feel anything about it. It doesn't even really help. Nothing really helps my pain anyway. So I don't take a lot of medications other than this one nerve blocker. But yeah, that any full blown opioid that was off the table for sure.
That was a really good decision on your half. A lot of people that I've seen go into like the relapse side, it happened with some type of physical issue or surgery or something that they came out and it was unexpected, and they were sober for years, and all of a sudden they get in a random car wreck, and now they're on pill, and it triggers that and leads to that kind of downward spiral. But I'm excited to go into the real estate side now. So
here we go.
Let's get into it. You have a crazy story, and I think people are gonna listen to that a little bit more than how to sell a house. But you got to sell houses to make money, and real estate's a great vehicle. Now, you were doing this at the same time, and also like a lot of times when people have major life issues, like some of you guys know, we had Matt Gardner on here. He was a top, like a real life Top Gun F-15 fighter pilot, came down with cancer, a lot of different health issues all of a sudden. And while he was going through medical treatment, that's what put his focus on real estate, and now he's crushing it. Very similar story to like what you're saying here. So when you started out in real estate, kind of give me that process. So you started out on the investment side or sales side, both or not? You just kind of give me the mentality of what you were trying to accomplish. And because now you have like $6 million plus in transactions up just right now, and you're crushing it. And but kind of give an idea of how you started in the industry, and then you got into connection with Tom Ferry, or kind of how that worked. And then you decided to come over here to the Wolfpack, and we'll kind of go through that kind of transition and how all that played out.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as with most firefighters, they all have a secondary job, right? Because you have all this time off, and here it's so expensive. I think like in my area, my average price point for a home is like average is like around $2 million for a residential home. 1-bedroom apartment, you're around, 650,000, right? So it's expensive. So I am like, this is perfect. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's not.
It's so it's like, for me, I'm like, well, I hated construction. I'm not going back. I already work a physical job. I'm not going to work another physical job on the side. So I said, real estate, I've always loved it just because of my background. My mom was an agent, or still is an agent. And so I've always been around it. So I'm like, oh, this would be a perfect side thing, kind of do it when I want. So I got in. I mean, the first 3 years, I don't know how many transactions I did. I don't know, 6 or 7, maybe something like that. It's just helping like some family and friends. Kind of was like in and out doing some training, but it was, I had to take a long stall because when I got with on the fire department, you have like a 1-year probation. So it's pretty intensive. And then from there, you don't have a real schedule. So I didn't want to commit to real estate because, all of a sudden I could get called in. It's like, you're coming in for a night shift. So it really stalled things out. But when I got injured, that's when I was working actually before that on a team with my mom. And then I was living in Vancouver, but my brokerage was way out in the burbs. And so when I got injured, I said, okay, I got to take this a little bit more seriously. And like COVID happened, but I joined a local, the biggest independent brokerage in my area, McDonald Realty, in 2020. And that's when I started to want to put money into my business, got a proper website, and then started moving on from there. So there's like a 2020 to 2021 taking a little bit more seriously, but then like COVID hit, right? So it was a weird dynamic to do these transactions and try to formulate through that. But then the next big point in my career was 2021, and that's when I said, you know what, I've been doing some of these property tours. I want to take things to the next level, because my biggest thing is realtors are so cheap. It is like embarrassing what they do. It is embarrassing how they market properties, and there's very few that do a good job. People won't even pay the $200 to get a proper floor plan, or they're doing photos on a luxury listing off their iPhone, and like, it's a disgrace. So I said, I'm going to come in this space. I'm going to give people what they want. I'm going to pay money for it. And for me, like, if it's my brand and I do it big. I want to make sure it's the best. I want to say that I'm the best. So I looked for a videographer and found him, and Untitled Marketing, give them a shout out. And they started doing property, our listings with them. And they're probably 4 to 5 times as much as what, you can get a listing video package, everything for, I don't know, $400 or $500 to get everything done. Just them with, what we do, it's well over $2,000 for that marketing material. So got into that. And then that started I started looking at all aspects. I'm like, every single detail needs to be dialed in. My business cards, my email signature, my property brochures, my buyer seller guide. So I took that whole year to start building out all these templates and making it exactly what I wanted. So 2022 was a good year. And then 2023, in 2022, I wanted to continue to take kind of things to the next level, because I'm always thinking of how I can better myself in all aspects, from the most minute detail to the biggest. So then I said, coaching, want to get to the next level. So I saw Tom Ferry, they're advertising, oh, we can get you to this level. They do a really good job on the phone selling you, right? So got on with the coach, and he was good because everything with my business was up here. I don't have any past, university training. So I'm not great with computers. I'm not good with systems. So it really helped me with some of the basics and trying to implement that, and giving me like a structure of like, okay, well, why aren't you writing down your how many calls you're making, things of that nature. So got to a point where I just felt that I outgrew Tom Ferry coaching. That was at the beginning of this year. My brokerage, they started, upping fees a little bit. And I, was thinking, what am I getting for my brokerage? I'm paying all this money. What am I getting? And then from Tom Ferry, I'm paying $1,800 a month coaching. Why am I doing that? And then it was a friend of mine from back east in Ontario. And he said, well, he's like, I'm not with EXP, but you love the videos, you're good at the videos, and you want to create this brand. Have you heard of Mike Sherrard? And I said, no. And he's like, he's with EXP. And first thing I said, I'm like, no, like, not for me. Everyone's EXP, they're a bunch of losers. They're a joke. I've seen some of their branding. I've worked with some of the agents, and like, this is the brand that I have that doesn't align with me. He's like, okay. He's like, well, this is his YouTube channel, to check it out. So I'm like, okay, started looking through his YouTube channel, like, oh, this guy's legit, he knows what he's talking about. And I think, I'd like to jump on a call. So I booked a call through his YouTube, had a really good first conversation with him. Then he contacted or got me in touch with Louis, again, with the systems thing, exactly what I was looking for. I'm like, well, I need help with my systems, and what I'm getting from Tom Ferry right now sucks. And this is like, what you guys offer is like, it's an elementary school to like university degree, and it's free. I'm like, this is like a no-brainer. And with like, I didn't understand the EXP model and things of that nature. And I love how you guys, EXP like promotes the brand. So like EXP, where we hold our license, they want you to be your own person. And then, the Wolfpack comes under as an accessory and like completely helps you as your pillars to be that brand and to be that flag for you, right? So I'm like, this completely aligns with what I want to do. The agent attraction stuff, that's awesome. At some point down the road, it gives you some options, but for me in production right now, this is exactly what I want. So, within, I don't know, a couple of days of those calls with Louis, I'm like, hey, I'm changing over. And then I think February 1st is my anniversary date.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of fun having you here so far, and appreciate your input on the calls, and always good seeing you. Let's we'll touch on a lot of this, but like I want to kind of go back to a kind of very common spot for salespeople. And it's not just real estate. I think it's sales in general. Like when I started out, I came into the investment space, which is a little bit different because to run that business, you have a lot of expenses and going backwards each month. And there's a lot of businesses that do have a monthly run through rate, which is a much higher risk than going into something that's sales driven, which is a lot of times we're looking at this as we can build a business with our work ethic and our time. And a lot of people struggle those first few years before they start investing in their business. And it's very common. And then when they do start investing, they start to see a little bit of growth and some return. And then they take what they make and reinvest it, and it compounds across itself. When you were kind of worried about putting money into your business and then you started doing it, what were some of the things that you thought is for some of the people in that spot right now, if they're scared to invest in their business, what do you think is the best use of their dollars in the beginning? What do you think, looking back at what you put some money into, where would you kind of advise them to start out?
Yeah, I think with anything, if you want to succeed, you need to figure out what your brand is as a whole. Like, don't just rely on whatever it is, Remax or even like EXP or whatever brokerage. You need to, if you're just relying on your brokerage to get you through, you're just going to be like everyone else within that brokerage. What are you doing to separate yourself? So, for me, that my first step was, how can I change everything with my branding? Like, EXP gives you like a brand, their branding station. Well, do you want to use that, which every other EXP has the same card, or do you want to do something a little bit different? Maybe find some colors, find a logo, and all that. Right now, I mean, it's even easier every year. Every probably 3 months is going to get easier and easier, especially with all the AI tools, right? Because you can, I don't know what the AI website is, but you can literally put your name, your brand, be like, this is what I want, create me a whole template, and they'll spit you out everything for a fee. But there's that AI stuff is cheap. You can, pay for it as on a monthly or whatever the case is, or even Etsy. I've used a lot of Etsy stuff. You buy like some of these buyer guides or templates, it's fully customizable on Canva. So you take a couple that you like. They're like, some of them are like $3, $5. Take some time in the evenings to, put your branding in. And then you start having like this package where you can really stand out. If you go to a listing presentation or what your stuff is on your Instagram, there's a lot of things that you can control that is free. It just takes some time. And if you're not visual, you're having problems with that. Like I said, there's a lot of AI tools, or you can, Fiverr and things like that. People can make something up for you pretty quickly, but it's definitely creating your own brand doesn't have to cost a lot of money at the beginning. When you start getting into video production and things of that nature, then that's where like the cost comes in. But in the meantime, you need to take baby steps and make sure that, your foundational pieces are there before you try to get up to the top. Because if all of a sudden you pay all this money for, say, a super duper listing video, and then, maybe a luxury agent or a seller wants to get in touch with you, and then you come in, but your branding's all over the place, and they're like, oh, this kind of is weird. Like, you have this vibe in your video, but then you come in and you're kind of scattered and you don't have these other materials. It might not be cohesive for you.
Yeah. You got some pretty cool stuff that you're posting on like your Instagram. So you can give people your Instagram handle, but you're doing a lot of like short form and property videos. Kind of like, what's your take on like what's been working best for you with your content creation and strategies behind it? Is, which platforms, shorter videos, longer videos, property video, like what do you think people should be putting their time on? And then maybe give your take after that on the investment of hiring a photographer. And is this something you believe people should be doing? And is there kind of like a time where they should wait to do this, or like when do you think that it makes sense for them to kind of write that check and bring someone on to help with that?
Yeah, I think, when you audit your business, you'll know, maybe if you're new, it doesn't apply, but if you've been in real estate for a while, you'll know what channels work the best for you. And I knew Instagram, for whatever reason, always worked really, really well for me. Even when I had like 300 or 400 followers, I was still getting like a pretty good funnel. And even now, I don't have a funnel, or a big, sorry, not a funnel, but a big following. I have just over 1,000 followers. But I've had huge growth over the last couple of months. And it's because your Instagram is your resume. So I think that is a very powerful tool. I make sure, if you, my handle is kylemark.realestategroup. Everything is in sequence. It all looks the same. The branding's there. And why I pay for that, those high photos and that marketing package, is because then I can start repurposing that onto my Instagram and cutting that up and just have, you know, unending photos and content. So when people now go on my page, they just see, because I try to post 5 to 6 times a week, that it's full of stuff. Whether they look at it or not, it doesn't really matter, but it shows that I'm busy. It shows that I have a professional package. Things, if they do want to key on it to see what my listings are, you know, things that I do, they have the opportunity to do that. But, you know, when I go now to like listing presentations, it's not even a presentation. I'm the only person. Is because they see me, they've been following me on Instagram, or they come to my account, they know that what I'm all about. And then when I go there, it's like, where do I sign? There's no pushback. And that's because I have a brand now. And it didn't happen overnight. You know, this has started in 2020. You know, we're in 2023 now, but, you know, taking those baby steps, taking some chances, betting on yourself. Because if you don't believe in yourself, then you might as well just leave. If you don't think you can do it, then don't even put the money in. You have to have that belief. And if you don't have that belief, then you need to figure out why. What is it? You need to, you know, listen to podcasts. You need to read some books to get that self-belief. For me, I feel like I know I can do anything. You know, I can do what I want. There's areas that I want to go. Do I wish I was in those spaces earlier? Yes, but those things are out of your control. Things are going to fall into your lap when they do, and then you got to make sure that you are you're ready for that, and you can take advantage of those situations.
That belief that you can do anything, and the belief in yourself that's strong for you now, did that develop along your journey in life, or was that with you from childhood, or do you remember having self-esteem issues at any moment, and kind of getting over it, or kind of how did that play out? Because it is the right mindset, and it's the only mindset to win in business, but some people have to discover it, and some people say they were born with it. But just curious your take on all that.
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, it was nature, not nurture. I think I was born very type A, very independent, very high energy. So, you know, very type A individuals all usually have the same type of characteristics, and they have, you know, that self-belief is just within them, that they can do whatever they want. And they can, you know, it's a double-edged sword. You know, if you don't handle it properly, for me, I got myself into lots of trouble. You become a narcissist, you can be a dick, people don't want to be around you. So you do need to make sure that, and that's, you know, with time and wisdom, how to, you know, navigate that properly. So for me, I never really had to develop it. For me, it was like toning it down, and making sure that it was like a usable force, not something that was out of control. Because there was, you know, probably when I was starting, when I was like 14 up until, I don't know, up until I was like 30. You know, I was out of control, and it hasn't been until the last couple of years, you know, where I've been able to use that wisdom and calm down a little bit to use it and control that sphere. But for those who don't have it, and it is more of a nurture, you can totally get that self-belief, but you're gonna have to put the work in. You're going to have to, you know, whatever your craft is that you don't know, what you're unsure of, you need to learn how to master that, whether it's reading, getting on the tools, doing it with your hands. You do have to nurture that. But for me, it was more of a nature thing.
Yeah. I've seen it. A lot of people do that, where they kind of let it go out of control through their 20s, and then 30 is a big number. A lot of times people hit 30 and it just kind of like slows them down, and they kind of reassess, and they do reassess everything they've done up until that moment, where they want to go going forward, and it creates a new level of awareness. And a lot of times we change a little bit as we hit 30. I'm turning 39, I guess, in November. So we'll see what happens when I hit 40 here. I'm a little bit worried to do that, but we'll see what happens. But now with all these listings that you're doing, and how much of that is there all coming from social media, or you do traditional marketing, or your entire business is social driven?
Yeah, social and referral. I've never done any PPC stuff. I've done some SEO stuff, which was like a huge waste of money. I was using this guy, it was like $1,000 a month, because I thought, you know, maybe I can get onto the top page. That didn't work. That was pretty much my biggest investment. So for me, And I at the beginning too of my career, I did a lot of door knocking, so I did get some contacts through that. And actually, I called two of them, people that I door knocked in 2017. I have two listing presentations coming up that I called yesterday. So that was an avenue for me, but mostly it's from my social or referral, or people see my videos online and get in touch with me. So, one of my recent ones, it was my biggest listing to date, 4.25 $1 million property. So if you want to see it, kylemark.ca/Sperling, you can see all the information there. But I really went big on that because I wanted to get into that next tier. So, I rented, 3 supercars. I think it's like $700,000 worth of cars for the video and the photo shoot. I did like a party, the VIP party preview that cost me around almost $3,000 just for that party, because I brought the film crew back in to get content and do that. Like I was talking to you before, my property, it's not a brochure now, it's a catalog, 24 pages, perfect bound, binding, soft cover book. They're like $27 a pop. I went big with it just to make sure, and now I'm like, I want to get to that next tier. I'm teetering to get in there. So, I'm getting into that $3-4 million range. What is it going to take to get in the $10 million range? What's it going to take to the $20 million range? And to kind of circle back with the Wolfpack, I didn't really have that mindset until I started really talking with you guys. I think it would have come eventually, but I'm like, oh, if I, $2 million, $3 million listings, that's awesome. But now being in these mastermind calls where you're talking to us, Mike's talking to us, you're bringing in all these like other heavy hitters within the Wolfpack and even outside the Wolfpack. I'm like, well, why can't I get there? Why can't I be an icon agent? Why can't I get a $20 million listing? Yeah, that's $4 million listings, nice, but now it's like I want to get a 10. Because that Mike, and this is a shout out to Mike. Mike told me when I get it a $10 million listing, he's going to bring some of his cars out for my listing video. So that's like on my docket.
Yeah, you just got the new one.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're right. Yeah, like the sphere of influence is massive, or the environment that you're in, your proximity to those people. So when we were talking about it early on in life, the addiction part of that probably was that you knew you deserved more and you were more and you could become more, but you were sitting in a life stuck around the wrong people and dwelling and kind of like stuck in quicksand or something where you regretted and you knew you shouldn't be doing this. But as you cut off those severs with those old relationships and you move into a different type of environment, everybody around you is winning, everybody around you is waking up and trying, and everybody's moving the same direction to hopefully change their lives for their family. It motivates you and inspires you, and also makes achieving things at a high level seem way more achievable because everybody around you is doing it. And so it is a big part of success, is getting in that right environment, getting into a high performance arena where everybody's going for it, swinging for the fences. And also, when you do come up and you say like, okay, I want to make 100K, everybody's gonna be like, a month or a year, right? And you see that everybody's thinking bigger, and that makes you think bigger, because there's nothing that says you can't go do the number one highest price point listing in your marketplace. You could do a $20 million transaction if they have them. The only thing stopping you from doing it is your mindset, from the belief that you're going to do it. Because if you don't believe you can do it, just like you said earlier, you wouldn't even start going down the thought process of how to do it. And that's where you have to start with the belief side, because once you believe you can, now you start looking for the ways how to. And it's super important to understand that. And a lot of people just block off that they can never achieve anything. And when they do that, they just sit down, drift through life. But yeah, I'm excited to see what you do, man. Is there anything that you want to leave with the audience here? Any words of wisdom? I think they're going to be all enjoying this one, because you shared a lot that I think is going to hit hard emotionally for a lot of them, and also that that you can come back from certain problems early in life and get to where you have a successful business, and you can go for big things, and you can go bigger in life, and you don't always just have to stay the way you're at, or go backwards actually. But any last messages you want to give on the way out of here to
Yeah. Yeah, I think like depending on, we all have our own trauma. Don't let that define you. Don't let your age define you either. If you're wanting to start something new at 30 or 40 or 50, it can be intimidating, but life is also short, so you need to take advantage of it and don't get down. Everyone has that fire within them. It's just surrounding yourself and giving yourself the tools to stoke that fire for you to succeed.
Yeah, I like that. For the age side, it's a lot easier to start a business at an older age now and get there quickly, because you're 2 to 4 or 5 years from building a really successful business. So even if you're in your 60s, what if you live to your 90 now? And it used to be, before social media and technology, it took a good 10, 15 years to really get a strong business off the ground. So if you look at like the OG entrepreneurs, it took effort and it took a lot longer time horizon and a lot more fortitude to stay in the game. And now, I mean, really, you could hop in 3 years, have a really successful business. So doesn't matter how old you are, it matters if you want it, and you go for it. But appreciate you coming on here, man. Really enjoyed the story. I actually learned some more things about you, and I do have a lot of respect for your journey here. And I will get this out. I'll let you know when it's ready, and we'll pump it over the internet and hopefully inspire some others and to follow in your suit, in your story, and create their own. But other than that, guys, appreciate you coming to the show, and we'll see you on the next one.